Hey everybody, it's Green Films Official here. In case you've been living under a rock, a little film called Top Gun Maverick came out recently, and it's been getting a lot of praise from both the general audience and critics. It is a legacy sequel film, so similar to other movies like Mad Max Fury Road or Jurassic World, that follows Pete Maverick Mitchell again 30 years after the original Top Gun. I heard a lot about Top Gun for years and meant to watch it for quite some time. However, I didn't get around to watching it until recently. When the trailers for Maverick started coming out, I thought, hey, that movie looks pretty cool. And then around May this year, when it was just around the corner, I thought that there was no better time than then to finally watch the original Top Gun. This video was originally just going to be a review of Maverick, but after watching the first Top Gun, I realized there are a few things I had to say about that film too. Oh, and just FYI, I'm not going to be spoiling Maverick in this video, but I am going to be spoiling the original Top Gun, so yeah, just consider yourself warned. One thing that needs to be understood about the original 1986 Top Gun is that it is very much a relic of the 80s. From its soundtrack, the way the characters behave, just everything about this movie just oozes the 80s. I mean, for God's sake, this film opens with Highway to the Danger Zone. This film's like just 80s vibe is both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it's extremely charming and it's very nostalgic for some people, but on the other hand, it's ridiculously hammy at points. The dialogue is where the hamminess really shows. Like, seriously, just listen to this, man.
Black for the alternates is down in the ladies' room.
This is what I call a target-rich environment.
You live your life between your legs, man.
Go see when you can get laid in a place like this.
I'm telling you, I'd be happy to find a girl who talked dirty to me. Hey, Slider. Thought you wanted to be a pilot, man. What happened?
Goose, you're such a dickhead. Whose butt did you kiss to get in here, huh?
Well, the list is long but distinguished.
Yo, so's my Johnson.
Sometimes it just took me out of the movie and made things difficult to take seriously. The whole bar scene is just so hammy. It's like hammy personified, man. However, if you're willing to look past the aspects of this film that are very much of their time and haven't aged well at all, I think that this is a pretty solid drama. It is a very character-driven movie that is just as much about the relationships Maverick has with the people he loves as it is him trying to graduate from Top Gun. Something I love about this film is that its protagonist isn't flawless. He is a very cocky and arrogant individual who takes unnecessary risks that put his future in danger. Then, after his best friend Goose dies because he messes up, he realizes he has to step up and become a better person. He is initially resented by his peer Iceman for his dangerous behavior, but after he grows, he becomes one of Iceman's friends. It's not the most complicated or interesting character arc, but it's a good one nonetheless. It reminds me of Nathan Drake's character arc in Uncharted 4, when he realizes that through his obsessive nature he's hurting the ones he loves, and is redeemed not by himself, but by them. I also quite liked Charlie, even though she doesn't grow or develop in any meaningful way like Maverick does. I thought her storyline of being torn between Maverick's instructor and his lover was pretty interesting. She was overall just generally fairly likable, and she helped move the story forward. I wasn't the biggest fan of their romance subplot though. It wasn't bad, but the film just focused on it a bit too much for my liking. Goose wasn't too complex, however, he was likable and fun to watch, and, that helped make his death have an impact. I think the soundtrack is pretty great. Much like the actual movie, some of it is of its time, but there are still some banging tracks in here, like Danger Zone and especially the main theme song. The cinematography during the flying scenes is pretty neat and creative, and there are some really cool visuals for the time. However, once the characters are on the ground, the cinematography isn't quite as good. It's not bad, but it's just kind of uninspired. It's just a typically shot film with nothing really unique or special going on. There are exceptions though, like I think this shot in particular makes good use of repetition. I think my biggest issue with this film is that the bad guys aren't really threatening at all. They're just kind of there. They show up in the first scene to establish that they exist, and then they just stop showing up until the end where they get blasted by Tom Cruise and the boys. It's just the stakes feel fairly limited as a result, and it made it a little more difficult to care during the climax. I'm not saying that they needed to kill off major characters or anything. I'm just saying if they showed up a little more and posed more of a challenge for the main characters, I would have been more invested. But thankfully, Maverick had a pretty solid character arc that carried the film. I just wish that, if the bad guys were more intimidating, I would have wanted to see Maverick succeed more, if that makes sense. While it is a little bit dated and is certainly not a flawless experience, the original Top Gun is still worth a watch. It has pretty solid characters and an interesting story. The flying scenes are awesome and memorable, and I'm gonna be humming that theme song until the day I die. The drama on the ground was fairly engaging, and I cared for the characters for the most part. If there's anything that this film does have, it's a soul. Anyways, that brings us to Top Gun Maverick. This film was delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed to the point that the fact that it's out is kind of incredible. When No Time to Die comes out before your film, that's how you know it's been pretty damn delayed. However, I have to say it was worth the wait because Maverick is a pretty massive improvement over the original, if I'm being honest with you. Something that should be noted about Maverick is that it is very similar to the original Top Gun. It hits a lot of the same beats and plot points as the original film does. However, there are a few key differences here, mainly that Maverick is the instructor now. This film's plot is that Maverick, after 30 years of service, is brought back to the Top Gun unit as an instructor. He has to train some of the best pilots the Navy has to offer for a mission that could potentially mean either life or death. Something I really like about this film is that it feels like there are more stakes and that there's more weight to what actually happens in the film. A clear threat is established early on and remains consistent throughout the film. I guess technically the bad guys were established early on in the first Top Gun, but they're not really referred to at all. Their presence is virtually non-existent. I liked the new, trainees. I thought they were pretty cool, although none of them really stood out to me except for Bob and Rooster. Rooster was great. He's the son of Goose from the first movie, and I really loved the relationship between him and Maverick. Rooster is determined to fly for the Navy no matter what, despite his mother's wishes. There is tension between him and Maverick because of what happened to Goose in the first movie, and so Maverick really pushes himself to train Rooster into being the best pilot he can be, so that he can come out of the mission alive and be respected for years. This is almost his way of avenging Goose. I thought that this relationship was much more engaging than the relationship between Maverick and Goose in the first movie. The interactions were fun to watch, but they mostly just sort of felt like two bros hanging out. I personally found the relationship between Maverick and Rooster in this film to be much more engaging because it feels like it has a lot more weight to it. I thought Maverick was a much more improved character in this film as a result of Rooster. While he has learned from his mistakes in the previous film, there are a few scenes that show that in some ways he's still the same asshole that he was in that first movie. In the first scene of this film, he destroys a multi-million-dollar plane just to prove it can go faster than Mach 10, and during a training sequence he does all these crazy stunts and tricks just to prove how good of a pilot he is. But once he realizes that he really doesn't want to let Rooster down, he really pushes himself and focuses most of his energy on him rather than himself. Yeah, that's right, I think the character work is better in this film than it is in the first movie, sue me. Speaking of characters, Iceman returns briefly for this film. His scene isn't very long, but it's very beautiful and heartfelt, and I really liked it. I don't want to give anything away about it, so I'll end it there, but yeah, it was very sweet. Oh, and the flying scenes in this film are awesome, particularly the climax. The climax in this film had much higher stakes than the original film's climax for me. There were numerous points during the climax where I thought one of the main characters was gonna die, which is not something I felt during the original film's climax. The cinematography when the characters were on the ground was much better in this film than it was when the characters were on the ground in the first film, in my opinion. It felt like there was so much more thought and creativity put into these shots than there was in the first film. However, while the cinematography during the flying scenes is still pretty good, I don't think it's quite as good as the original. There were still some pretty visually interesting shots like this, however, it felt like they were restricting themselves to, shots inside the cockpit and exterior shots of the planes flying. I wish that there were more shots with, like, the camera attached to the plane, like in the first film. The cinematography during the flying scenes was still pretty great. I just thought, it could have been just a bit better. Maybe I'm just being a nitpicky douchebag, who knows. Charlie from the first movie isn't in this film. She's been replaced with another woman named Penny, who was pretty likable. Though I thought it was weird that Charlie wasn't at least mentioned. Like, she was kind of important in the first film. If she was mentioned, I didn't catch it. There was also a, for lack of a better word, cringy use of flashbacks in this film. There's a scene where Rooster is playing a song on a piano in a bar, and it's the same song that Goose was playing on piano in the first Top Gun. And so Maverick starts having flashbacks. And I don't know, man. That was just unnecessary to me. I think Maverick's face was all that needed to be shown. The flashbacks just killed all subtlety that the scene had. Despite some of those issues, Top Gun Maverick is a great film and a significant improvement over the original. It feels like it has genuine stakes, I cared more for the characters, and it was just a blast to watch. While it is very similar to the first film, the way I see it, the first film set the foundations and this film built upon them. I highly recommend watching this film in cinemas while you still can. It is absolutely astonishing on a big screen, and yeah, just go see it. It's awesome. Anyways, that was my review of the Top Gun movies. A pretty solid duology, if you ask me. I'm interested to see whether or not they'll make a third film. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Your support really helps out. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you all. Peace.